Hi, everybody. This is Brandi Horton. I am the Vice President of Communications at Rails to Trails Conservancy, and I am really looking forward to today's conversation as we gear up for Celebrate Trails Day in just a couple of weeks. One of the things we like to do getting ready for Celebrate Trails Day, which if you aren't following along, is a big moment where we try to get as many people outside on trails as we can the fourth Saturday in April, which is April 27th this year, to really demonstrate how important these spaces are for our lives, for our communities, really contributing to the well-being of people, places, and the planet. And when we get ready for that, there's a lot of reasons why we do this work, why we want to get people out in these spaces, why we all love these spaces. So a couple of moments to do some deep dives on some issues that are important, that are really kind of driving the celebration this year. So today we're going to talk a little bit about how being outside is more than just kind of having fun. It's also an act of advocacy. And I'm so excited to be joined by Mel with Latino Outdoors and Tom with REI Co-op. And I'm going to pause for just a second and ask you both to introduce yourself. Mel, why don't you start?
Happy to. Thanks, Brandi, and hi, everyone tuning in. My name is Mel Mendez. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm currently calling in from the Bronx, New York, lands of the Munce Lenape. I am the New York City and Northeast Regional Coordinator for Latino Outdoors, and we are a community-led organization that's committed to bridging the outdoor equity access gap for Latino populations across the coast. We started 10 years ago as just a blog and a networking platform, and now we are well over 25 chapters and nearly 300 volunteer leaders across the country that are working to, provide free programming and equitable access to the outdoors for our communities. And then in the hopes of, as you mentioned, Brandi, moving from just recreation and enjoying the outdoors to actually advocating and working on protecting our green spaces. So super excited to be here today. Thank you.
We love having you. And I love the story of Latino Outdoors origin and where it is today, because I feel like it's such a testament to the power of like just bringing people together and how quick that grows, from a conversation on the internet to, all of this activation happening all across the country. Tom, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, thanks so much, Brandy. Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm Tom Bogert, he, him pronouns. I have the honor of heading up REI's state and local government affairs. Now, off chance you haven't heard of REI, we're the largest outdoor specialty co-op in the country. We have 23 million members across all 50 states, and we have almost 200 stores. And my work, my time at the co-op is really animated by helping ensure that every person has access and benefit of the power of life outside. And I'll just share, it is really special for me to be here today. I grew up with my folks dragging me out on my first mountain bike onto rail trails. I have maybe fond memories of mountain biking the Kettle Valley up in British Columbia. And I actually did my very first trip away from home. My first solo multi-day adventure was a bike trip on the Palouse to Cascades Trail. And so to be here today and to get to talk to all of you about getting folks outside on a rail trail is it's incredibly meaningful. And so I'm just very touched to be here today. And Brandi and team, thanks so much for having me.
I love that, Tom. And what you didn't know then was that you were riding on the Great American Rail Trail before it was officially a route. So the Palouse to Cascades is part of the westernmost section of the Great American Rail Trail. And what a fun way to do a first multi-day adventure as a young person. I love that. It's a little remote out there.
Yeah, and just how far we've come as a community since I
Absolutely.
did that. It's really
Absolutely.
incredible to see the change.
When you even think about, we now have 41,000 miles of multi-use trails all across the country. There are trails in every single state, and there are now connected trail networks being pursued in every single state. So for a movement that, we hear Mel sharing 10 years for Latino Outdoors, the trails movement's really only around 40 years old, ultimately, the multi-use trails movement. So much progress has been made. And I think so much of that comes from the joy and the passion that the people who are out in these spaces feel. It's not because, some members of Congress, they're super important. We're going to talk about that a little bit today. It's not because they decided to do this. It's because communities said, we want access to the nature. We want access to safe ways where we can kind of be active in our communities. We want that. And they demanded that. And when we look at what things like Celebrate Trails Day are all about, it's about bringing people together and kind of sparking that passion in a new way. We often talk about trails as connectors. The Blue Cascades is a connector all the way across the country for the Great American Rail Trail. These trail networks physically can connect us to the places we want to go, make those safe walking and biking routes. But they're also, and something that's really meaningful to me, is that they're community connectors. I live in Arlington, Virginia. I live in South Arlington. It is one of the most diverse zip codes in the country, actually. 22204 is known for receiving a lot of people from all over. And I am out on my local trail, and I see neighbors that I would not connect with otherwise. I got little kids. I see a lot of people at school. I see people in different places. I see older neighbors. I see neighbors who are out there doing their morning walk every day. We wave. There's this moment of connection that is just so different than what you might get in other spaces in the outdoors. And I think when we talk about what we're trying to achieve in each of our organizations and in the work that we're doing, I'm curious how you feel like trails might be important sources of community connection or sources of community in the work that you do. Mel, why don't you jump in first?
Absolutely. And that's a great question. And I think, Brandi, what I really love that you were kind of getting at is this idea of creating a space that holds community and that you can kind of frequently see, a lot of the same members within your community and develop relationships with those people. So even though maybe you're not having one-on-one conversations with everyone you're passing on a trail, there's this familiarity, and it's almost like when we think back to, I think so many people say like undergrad was a great 4 years of my life. And why was that? It's because you likely lived in a walkable community for the first time, where you had third places where you can recreate and enjoy. And, representing and living and coming from New York City, where green spaces can be very limiting or limited, finding a trail like in my local backyard right here in the Bronx even, and being able to say I can frequent that, whether that's using that trail to get from my home to the grocery store across the park, or maybe just a shorter pathway to the subway station so that I can get to work during the day. Those green spaces serve that daily functionality and creating kind of like a close neighborhood and community feel. And then, within Latino Outdoors, very simply, it provides a space for recreation, for a safe and accessible way for members of our community to recreate. And what we've noticed throughout our years of recreating on a lot of these multimodal trails is that, there's still so much awareness building that we're doing as well. And, from a Latina BIPOC perspective, when we're talking about marginalized communities who have historically been underrepresented or misrepresented in the outdoors, these spaces, these events where we're able to take folks, birding on this trail or to a local water hole and fish for the first time, it creates this sense of being, right? I belong in this space and I can safely do this, and I can recognize the people on this trail, and it's right in my own backyard. And that's what a huge part of the work that we're doing at Latino Outdoors is building that awareness and creating those pockets of safe, accessible spaces that families, and multi-generational families, right? We're not just talking children or adults, we're talking about our older relatives, our aunts and uncles as well, who can safely enjoy these spaces, whether that's for fun or again, for just to go to get groceries and their daily function in life and in their lifestyle. So it serves two incredibly important purposes in Latino Outdoors and personally just in my everyday use as well.
And I think I love what you said there about I belong in this space. And one of the things that's so important to the team at RTC right now is really getting people to think about trails as part of our everyday lives. They're for everyone, everywhere. They are accessible. They create this kind of opportunity to be in nature, whether that's functional or for fun right where you live. But also the reality is that it's not everywhere. So we still have a lot of work to do. Sadly, 41,000 miles in every single state does not connect every neighborhood. And our vision is that trails will connect everyone everywhere for whatever purpose it is that you are interested in pursuing. And Tom, when we think about, getting outside, being in these spaces, being an advocate for these spaces, people often ask me like, how do I do that? What do I do? And I'm always like, show up. That's the first step. Get out there, bring a friend, help build that sense of belonging. But I'm curious, when you think about showing up, when you think about kind of advocating for these spaces, what comes to mind for you? How do trails fit into that? What's kind of the story there about how we show up and really kind of fight for this infrastructure?
Yeah, I love this question so much. And for those who don't know what a government affairs person does. My day job is basically trying to figure out how do we get governments, whether it's the federal government, the state governments, your local county council or city council, how do we get folks to say, look, trails should be a priority. We want to help realize that vision, Brandi, that you laid out of trails connecting every community. And Mel, your thoughts about how do we re-envision community to be a place that is welcoming, belonging for everyone who wants to come out, whether you want to bird or walk or bike, whatever that looks like. And so much of that is how do we make biking a priority and make this infrastructure really a priority against so many other competing needs. And I really have three quick thoughts to share with all of you in thinking about like how your voice matters. So first, it really does. Your voice matters so much more than you can possibly know. And I just want to share a really quick story of Rebecca in Mossy Rock, Washington. It's a town of about 2,000 people, former logging town. Rebecca was a police officer, part-time police officer, and she saw so many kids who were walking along the highway to get to a local park. And just this sense of like, this isn't right. This isn't what we want for our community members. And she just started organizing community walks to make the same walk as the kid. Like having a conversation, getting others invested, getting her leadership invested, getting the mayor invested, inviting more community leaders along. And ultimately, this ended up transforming both the community conversation around what can our community look like? What should our future look like? But it ended up capturing the attention of both their local legislators, but also former governor who ended up championing this alongside others and saying, like, look, this is a story about how do we re-envision a community access for all community folks. And it really just started from one person saying, this isn't what I think we want our future to look like. And I'm going to invite a few others along for a conversation. So one, your voice really matters. Two, attendance is huge. And I am so darn grateful for Rails to Trails for saying we're going to take a day and we're going to really show what this community looks like. And for me, there are days in my work where I'm sitting in my basement in Seattle and you kind of lose the sense of like what's important and really what's at scale. And then you go out on a weekend and you see hundreds or thousands of people riding together. It matters. And in a former life, I was in leadership at a state agency that did a lot of recreation work. And you better believe we heard from our local folks, the trails, the hiking areas, the biking areas that were getting a lot of use. We heard about it. We knew it was at the top of our list and seeing like, how do we get to that tipping point of having people realize we're a huge community all across the country and this matters?
Yeah.
And then third, I just want to encourage you all to think about how do we grow this community? And a quick story in Chelan County, Washington, Central Washington. They were trying to figure out how do we take this amazing asset, the foothills near the community that was growing very quickly, and how do we make it something that can be a community asset for everybody, hiking trails, walking trails, things like that. So they started organizing a series of walks where community members, like after school, after they picked up their kids or on the weekend, Saturday mornings, they'd invite a few of their peers out. And, somebody happened to be a business leader who to the Chamber of Commerce and share the story. Somebody else happened to know the doctor who worked at the local Confluence Medical. And this momentum, it's really started to snowball where it wasn't just like people were like, yeah, we're bike people. It was, community leaders, community members, school teachers, PTAs, all saying like, this is the kind of future we want to have. This is the direction we want our community to grow. And they've had a massive capital campaign. They've made huge investments. It's really transformed the community. And it all started from people saying, come join us just for a walk or a hike or a ride, and the incredible power of that conversation. So Brandi, that's really what I think April 27th could represent for our movement.
I love all of that so much. And when you shared the story of Rebecca and seeing those kids walking on the highway, I have been in recent years so inspired by the walking school bus movement. So, after the pandemic, a lot of bus routes changed and they weren't able to support as many kids on school buses. And this intergenerational aspect of that too, where people who are retired are coming out and they're leading the young people in their community on foot and on bike to school because there's safety in numbers, but then also demonstrating, hey, we need safe routes for people to be able to get to school, to work, to the things in their community where they need to go. And I think the trail connectivity piece of that message is so strong. We we have recently launched a new brand, and in that effort, we were going through some of our archival photographs, which is super neat when you're an organization that kind of, this advocacy came and started really, from RTC 37 years ago. And the photos from the beginning, guess what they were out there doing? Walking in huge numbers on these abandoned corridors and showing all of the different generations of folks who could use these spaces and making that a moment to really kind of draw attention to the fact that that infrastructure was just kind of hidden and forgotten and people didn't really know that it was there and there was this huge opportunity. So the things that work tend to continue to work year after year, but it is showing the volume of people. And so Celebrate Trails Day, that is what it is about. And I think when we look at what's happening across the country this year, there's activities being planned in the majority of states. We've got people who are planning to participate in all 50 states. We've got over 100 to 150 events being planned all across the country. There's just so much happening. It's really exciting. And it's a moment to just tell all of our leaders, this matters, and this matters to so many different people with so many different interests. Sometimes folks think, oh, well, it's the bicyclists, or oh, it's this group, it's the enthusiasts. This is about our everyday lives. This is about having safety, right? When we're out there walking or biking or enjoying nature, whatever the action is. This is about being physically healthy. This is about keeping the planet healthy. And I get excited when I see those numbers and I get excited about what it represents. But I also want to bring it back to, what we're trying to achieve here collectively and how people can leverage a day like that. Like Tom, some of the ideas you shared, like the legislators paid attention. What are ways people can take what's happening on Celebrate Trails Day and bring more attention to it, maybe where they live? Any ideas for that, Mel or Tom?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. I think from more of like the community advocacy portion and inspirational and educational portion. I think, what's really exciting this year, Celebrate Trails Day also coincides with Latino Outdoors, Semas Outdoors campaign, and Semas Outdoors, Semillita, little seed. And so, you both in both Tom, in both of your stories, you talk about what does the future look like? And for us, it's about seeding that right now. It's about saying, there are children that look to us as just adults, look at our parents, at our grandparents and things like that as role models, as stewards, as people who tell us, how we can engage in the outdoors and what's safe and what's welcoming and things like that. And so, a huge part of our work and what we're really excited about, for this overlap is that we can really focus on what is the future for our children and how are they feeling inspired and motivated to be in the outdoors and to leverage these types of green spaces. And it's walking, it's saying like, hey, you can be on a scooter and I can take you part of that way, while scootering and strolling about. It's showing those different ways you can be on those trails. And then you're planting a seed of inspiration, right? And I think we talk, nearly 40 years for RTC and 10 years for LO, and it's just none of these movements happen overnight. It starts with a seed. It starts with that level of inspiration. It starts with, at least for me personally, it took me, getting out on a trail a couple times for me to text my brother and text my family and say like, hey, did you know that this trail is literally right behind us? And how can, like, let's barbecue, let's go on there, and building that awareness so that, as anyone's theory of change is, once you kind of get that bite, once you get that excitement and that personal connection, then, folks can advocate, and advocacy takes on a myriad of different approaches, and we need every single one of those approaches. I cannot stress that enough. It's storytelling, it's lobbying on the Hill. It's even, I think, sometimes when we say like, call your local representative, I think oftentimes people are like, yeah, we need to complain and do something about something. But you can also just share, I had a really great experience on this trail. I'm so glad it's in our community. And I'm so glad that you're working to protect that. And, it's really important. Your local Congress people need to hear that as well. It goes it runs in parallel with, you know, demanding more action, demanding more funds, protection and maintenance for these trails. But it goes a long way to showcase a story of how I fell in love with this trail and this is how it helps me. You know, again, going back to Tom's first point, it's getting the story out there, because if we don't tell it, if we don't invite other people, if we don't invite our friends, our family and community, then how do we even move forward when no one knows? So for me, a big part of that advocacy piece is the education and awareness and building that safety so that people can feel like, yes, I can share that with others as well.
And Celebrate Trails Day creates a moment to do that, but that's something that can happen every single time you get out on a trail. I love what you've both shared because Tom, your aha moment came early. Mel, you're like, I got out on that trail a couple times before I was like, wait a minute, everybody. And everyone who has fallen in love with these spaces has that moment where they were like, oh, I got it. And spread that joy, right? Take that and tell a friend and bring them out there with you. So kind of a closing question for everybody, because I think the idea that advocacy takes many shapes, sizes, and forms. I think that Celebrate Trails Day in and of itself is a day of joy. It is a day of impact. It is a day of action. It is simply by getting outside, you are sending a message. You are part of the count. You are part of the numbers at the national level that really illustrates how important these spaces are. But you can also do more than that, right? You can, make a phone call. You can send a thank you letter to a local decision maker who maybe helped to kind of get that trail done. You can say, hey, I love my trail, but it ends in the middle of a highway. Can you help us get it across the highway? What's the next step? You can invite a local elected official out to your event. If you're going out, invite somebody to come with you. There's so many things that you can do. So I'm curious if there's one action from each of your points of view that people could take to really help out right now. What do you think that action is? Tom, why don't you start?
Yeah, I'm going to cheat and I'm going to do two, because there's just so much incredible opportunity here. So first, sending a message can make a tremendous impact. REI has been building out a tool to connect our 23 million members to decision makers. And I'd encourage all of you, just go take a look, rei.com/act. We have heard from congressional offices and from legislative offices, it takes sometimes less than a couple dozen emails to change a policy trajectory of an office. Really not that many when you're talking about 150,000 constituents. So you all right now could make a difference just by sending an easy note. But the other piece, I just encourage you all to learn more about the barriers holding many communities back from time outside. I was remarkably privileged in getting to spend my time as a kid learning about and feeling welcome in the outdoors. And unfortunately, it's just not the case for so many communities. It's 100 million people in this country, 1 in 3 of us who don't have a park within a 10-minute walk. And you think about the power of trails to connect us to other parts of communities and other spaces, and how decisions that have been made for decades have created communities that have these resources and others that don't. So if you do nothing else, learn about that, look around your own neighborhoods and see where is that going well and which communities in your city or town don't have those same access and resources. That's a place to focus and to spend our collective energy. So Brandi, thanks for having us and really appreciate the folks listening on this.
Mel, what about you? What's your act or two if you've got them?
One, Tom, love that second portion, especially since it hit so close to home for me personally. And yeah, to add to that, I would say, both RTC and Latino Outdoors on our websites, we have different ways folks can connect, find trails and discover different ways they can enjoy their trails for Celebrate Trails Day. And so definitely take a look and see, where you can enjoy and find inspiration from being outdoors. And then, yeah, and understanding, where are these local trails as well, and seeing, what are the different ways that you can insert yourself into the conversation. And I think, Brandi, you hit it on the head very early on in this conversation. Protecting, conserving, and maintaining these types of green spaces is a solution to a myriad of different issues, whether we're talking about, childhood health, in terms of commuter access to different parts of our cities or communities, to even accessible recreation and green spaces. preserving these trails allows us to, it's a common solution and resolution to a lot of the issues that we're seeing. So, you know, again, +1 to what Tom said in terms of educating ourselves regarding some of the marginalization and the disparities that happen in the outdoors, and then committing to, you know, to enjoying those spaces and figuring out how you can be a part of the conversation and be a part of the solution as well.
Yeah, I love all of that so much. And I am personally so inspired for April 27th, but also inspired to find and get out on more trails every day. So a little bit of that is in my day-to-day job. I happen to love trails, but I hope that everyone watching is also feeling a little bit extra inspiration. And please do take a look at rei.com/act, take a look at Latino Outdoors website, take a look at RTC's website. We have tons of resources to help you get on this advocacy journey, but also to just maybe the first step is getting involved on Celebrate Trails Day. And we hope that you have that aha moment and keep it going. So with that, thank you both so much, and looking forward to the next conversation next week.
Thanks, Brandi. Happy
All right.
celebration.
Thank you all.
See you later. Bye-bye.